Hello, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie. I'm here with Susan. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Guthrie.
How are things going?
Good. The snow has melted in my backyard. Finally.
That's pretty awesome. I'm in Chicago, and there's sunny and beautiful today.
Yeah. We went from winter to summer in like 1 week, so there was no spring. It's all right with me. I'm very happy. It's warm. I'm happy.
So, what is our topic today?
Well, I thought we'd talk about an interesting topic that you recently did one of your video blogs on, which has to do with the relationship between trust and public shaming. As weird as that sounds. And so there's research on how you build a culture of trust. And there's also research. And in this research, I thought you explained it well, but it is kind of complicated.
Yeah.
Because it also has to do with, not only with trust and with this idea of public shaming, but then there's something about altruism was in this research study. But I thought it was really interesting. And there's so much going on, kind of in our culture in general and in the news about, there's a lot of public shaming going on, to tell you the truth. And so...
Well, no, there's not.
There's not?
It's yes and no. And that's...
All right, well,
we can get to that.
We can get into that. But anyway, I thought that given everything that's been going on, and I don't know, we should talk about that. So is that all right with you?
Yes, absolutely.
So I don't know how to start this. You want to just talk about like the setup of the research, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So there's a bit of one of the big problems that we find when we do a lot of work with a lot of companies is that whatever information we give them is nice, but really the answer to their question is how do we change the culture of our company to implement those ideas. And so figuring out exactly how to have a culture that is positive and that kind of does what you want is difficult. So there's this idea, and we've heard it. I think this idea has kind of been around for decades, because there's been a lot of kind of businessy books about creating a winning culture and that kind of stuff. And yeah, so there are kind of two ways that you can create a good culture, and what seems to be important is that you need a culture of trust, because when a team trusts each other, that's when you get the best results. It appears that
you mean just like whatever the...
Well, let me give you an example. Right, so let's imagine it's a small team. And you have the boss person, and you have the one or two minions working underneath that person. If the person who is in charge, let's just say they don't trust the underlings to do a good job. They have no faith that they will be able to do what they need. So what does that person what does the boss have to do to make sure that things are done well?
I don't know what.
Well, the boss will be over their shoulder every second, micromanaging all of their behavior, right?
Which is actually a really bad idea.
Well, of course, right? And anyone who has had a boss who's been over their shoulder all the time and not in a positive way, right? And they're not over their shoulder because they want to encourage them to grow and learn. They're over their shoulder because the boss wants to do all the work. They have to micromanage it because so every single... so if you're the underling, it's no fun. Every decision that you make, you have to check and double check that your boss is okay with it, and the boss will just glare, and you'll have to do all this stuff. And so if you're underling, you're not empowered.
And if you're the boss, it's no fun either. You know, there was in one of my books I write about some interesting research about trust, which is not the research you're going to talk about. No. But it did show that the best way to get someone to trust you was to do an action that showed you trusted them.
Right.
That's actually how con men work.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, talk about that for a second.
Well, yeah. So you know, there are people that are considered con men, right? Who for a living, they just con other people. They lie and set up a situation where that you think that they're doing this, but they're actually doing something else to try and get money or whatever. And apparently, if you're a con man, or con woman, one of the tricks of the con person, one of the tricks of the trade is that you for instance, let's say the con person has a really nice car, you know, like a brand new BMW or something, or they've rented one. They'll take the keys and they'll hand them to you and say, "Oh, hey, just take the car. Don't worry about it. Just take it. I trust you. Just go ahead. You can use the car." You know, they'll take actions that say that, in which essentially they're saying, "I trust you," and then by doing that, you tend to trust them back.
Oh, hey, look, take this $500 for me and put it in the bank.
Yeah.
You know, I can't make it right now, but here's just $500.
Yeah, so anyway, that was a diversion, but
right.
But I'm just saying that if you want someone to trust you, if you're trying to build trust, one of the worst things that you can do is to show that you don't have trust.
I know. And I know that sounds...
micromanage, right? Because then that tells me you don't trust me.
To do a good job.
And exactly. So now we're not building trust.
Right. Right. And so it's obviously a two-way street.
Yeah.
You know? So...
Okay. So then what do you do about this?
Well, we're not... Hold on. There's a lot more.
Things you need to talk about. All right, go ahead.
Things to talk about. So, okay, so we know that you have to have, you know, the culture of trust is generally a good thing. And if you read any kind of like leadership books, there are kind of just some well-known things that you can do to be, the how to be an effective leader. And a big part is to learn how to delegate. Learn how to empower others. Learn how to inspire others. These are all pretty common things. So the one of the, I think, misconceptions though, right? So we know we need a culture of trust, but how do you create that? And one of the, I think, misconceptions is that you create trust based on altruism. So think of a community where there's no crime. And the instinct is to say, well, there's no crime because everyone's really nice. And that, they trust that there's not going to be crime because crime hasn't been, like, committed on them. Okay. And so to create a community of trust, what you need altruism. You need, people to
be loving and caring and nice to each other. Absolutely.
And certainly, I don't think that's true. That if there's not a lot of crime around you, that will create safety. But I don't think that creates a culture of trust. Trust and safety are two different things.
They are?
I think so.
A feeling of safety is not the same as a feeling of trust.
Yes. So, for example, let's say you work at burger joint. And you have, and what you do doesn't matter. Your boss doesn't care what you do. No one cares. You can have a culture of safety, right? The boss isn't checking in on your work because the boss doesn't care. And so you're not worried or stressed that
Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm not going to lose my job.
Yeah, but that's not a culture of trust necessarily. That's a culture of
Right.
safety, which is nothing I do matters, no one cares, so no one's going to try. But
Nothing bad is going to happen.
right, but that doesn't exactly encourage good work either.
Right.
That's just everyone knowing that I don't have to do a good job and there'll be no negative repercussions. So okay, so to lay that out, I guess I should just jump into the research, huh?
Go ahead.
All right. So the research I'm going to talk about, there's a study or two I want to talk about. And it generally has to do, people kind of figured this stuff out using what's called, it's game theory games. And I don't know how much you want me to talk about what. So I'll just start and you can tell me when I need to explain something.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So there are these various game theory games that you can play. For example, like the ultimatum bargaining game. And these games are, game theory basically says you'll have your Nash equilibriums where people, if you set up a thing in a certain way, then each actor has, the path that they're kind of going to take. And the prisoner's dilemma is kind of the classic, a classic example. But there are lots of other games, and some of the games are a lot simpler. And you can use these games to elicit decision behavior from people. So in the same way that, for example, if you're trying to figure out what's the value of something, you can play games with participants and be like, hey, will you, here's the object, here's a stack of cash, which one would you prefer? Do you want to take the money or do you want to take the object? And by playing those types of games, you can get you can elicit a value of the object from a person. And generally, playing the game is more valuable than just saying what's this worth to you, because oftentimes there is going to be a difference between what people say an object is worth and what they actually do when they have a stack of money in front of them. So in the same way, when you ask people what are they going to do, that might be different than if you play a game. So does that make sense?
Yeah, so there are these games. These are games that have been developed to test certain theories.
Correct. And they haven't been developed to test certain theories. They just, they are what they are.
They're games and they can be useful in testing certain theories. Okay.
For behavioral scientists.
Okay.
So there's, so the ultimatum bargaining game, and it was kind of popularized in a paper of 1982 by Guthrie, Schmittenberger, and Schwartz, and in a paper titled "An Experimental Analysis of Ultimatum Bargaining." So I don't think they invented the game, but kind of, I guess I'm giving them credit for kind of popularizing it. And here's how the game works. So there are 2 players and some money.
Okay, 2 players and some money.
Right?
Are these people like sitting in the same?
Doesn't matter.
Next to each other?
It doesn't
matter.
It's all variation of the game. One person has all the money.
Okay, so I have all the money.
You have all the money. Yeah, we'll play with me and you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say it's $100. Okay.
Okay.
You then make an offer to me.
I'm offering you some of the money.
Some of the money. You could somewhere between 0 and 100.
And I decide how much.
Exactly.
Okay. Why would I offer you money?
Well, that's the game.
It's my move. I'm supposed to give you some money.
Yes.
All right.
You give me money. If I accept the offer, then the amounts get filled, right? So if you let's just do the classic example. You have $100. You offer me $50.
Okay.
I accept the offer, and then we both get $50.
$50.
50-50. Okay.
Okay.
However, if I reject the offer, both people receive nothing.
You mean I lose all my money?
Correct.
So if I offer you $10 and you don't take it,
no one gets anything.
Okay.
Now, the game is interesting Because so let's just say, right, it's $100 and you offer me $1.
Yeah.
Two people are playing together, but that's why it's called an ultimatum bargaining game, because I, as the second actor, I have no good options, right? I'm at the mercy of whatever
I mean,
you.
if I offer you $1, it's $1.
Right, exactly. So even though it's completely unfair that you get $99 and I get $1, my only options are to take whatever offer you give, which could be $1, or to get nothing.
So you should take the $1 because $1 is better than 0 or $5.
And that's the game theory part. Is
But
that
you don't, do you?
Well, it depends. Some people do. So the game theory says I should take whatever offer is presented because that's the only correct move, because otherwise I get nothing. And something is better than nothing. And of course, there is a certain point where, out of spite, I say, screw you, you're a jerk, and I'm just going to blow the whole ship up.
And I'm going to not take your offer because do you know when you're playing this game that if you reject the offer, then I get nothing?
Yes.
And so you get pissed at me and you say, fine, you can
And
give me $1. I'm going to reject it.
And there's value in betrayal.
You'll lose $99.
Humans love betrayal. They really, if they get mad at something, they're perfectly
happy. They like
happy.
revenge.
Yeah. Even if it costs them something, they're perfectly happy to burn it all down. So
okay,
and so you know, the rational actor, right? If you wrote a computer program, had an AI program, make these decisions and say, make the best decision for you, right? That's in your best interest.
The computer would take
always
the $1.
takes the $1, right? Or even down to a penny, right? If you want to break it down even further. But that's not what happens in the real world. And that's why the game is brilliant, and that's why you get fun results that you can then study and find lessons in this. Because humans don't take the $1. Now, it's one thing if so that's the basis of the game, and I hopefully that makes sense.
Yep, makes sense.
The next part is then it's one thing if you play the game once.
Right.
It's another thing if you play the game multiple times, because then you have a history. And then, so if we played the game once and you offer me $1, I'll probably take the $1. But after a certain period of time, I'm eventually not going to take the $1, right? It's the classic kind of like the populi rising up, against the bourgeoisie.
It's the French Revolution.
Yeah, exactly. We're like, we're not going to take it anymore.
All right, wait a minute. I have a question though. If we play multiple times, are we taking turns in terms of who has the money and is making the offer?
Well, it depends on your setup, but let's just assume not. Now, that said, is that once you start to have a history, it actually is in your best interest not to take the $1.
Why?
Think of the game theory of a strike, right? If the offer is today, either I can get paid and take whatever the boss man gives me, or I don't have to get paid and I will go on strike. Yeah. Now, it's the same. In some ways, it's the same game. However, by going on strike, you're kind of burning all the bridges down that day. But there's a history involved. So let's say I reject the $1 and you get nothing. Well, because I've blown things up, you've actually lost $99. The value of losing $99 is very high. So the next time we play, you'll think I better not offer $1 because I could risk losing the 99.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that risk of anarchy, of rebellion, of ruining everything for everyone that then creates a more fair outcome, because out of fear that the lower class in this game will straight reject you, you'll offer $5 or $10 or a more equitable solution that makes the person who's getting the lesser end of the bargain a little more willing to work with you. So it is a decent strategy when you're playing with history to actually not take the $1. because then you'll be able to get more the next time you play.
Okay.
Right? So does this kind of make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So you can kind of see how you're developing when you play this game multiple times. You start to develop a culture. You start to develop a society because of a power imbalance.
Okay.
And humans are really, really good at whatever you do. If you just put a bunch of people together and you give them a task to do, they will create a culture and a society around it very, very, very quickly. And you've seen this in your talks, right? We just say we just make a random, or in our workshops, right? We make a random group, right? And you're group A, you're group B, and without almost having to do anything, right? The groups form names, especially if they compete against each other. They form names and they're cheering against the other group.
Yeah.
Right? Like very within a minute or two, and they form some sort of their own identity that's separate and distinct and unique. So we're very good at this. So if you just play this game a couple of rounds, you start to develop dynamics and a culture. Blah blah blah, blah blah blah.
Okay.
Any questions?
No, you need to keep going though.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm moving on to a paper called "Trust, Reciprocity, and Social History" by Berg, Deckhout, and McCabe, something like that. So they ran an experiment using a derivative of the ultimatum game that I described. And the experiment goes like this. There are two subjects or participants in room A and room B.
Okay.
Okay? Each of them are given $10.
Okay.
In room B, if you're in room B, you just pocket your money. It's yours.
Okay.
In room A, you have to decide how much to send to your anonymous counterpart in room B.
Okay.
Right? So, and anything you don't send, you get to keep in your pocket
Okay.
if you're in room A. Now, here's the rub. Whatever money you send, the person A sends to room B, that money then gets tripled. So let's play the basic game, right? We both get $10. Who's A and who's B?
I'm A. You're B.
Okay. So
We have $10.
we have $10. I keep my $10. Okay. So
You keep your $10.
right. And now you as A, what do you decide to do?
So wait a minute, I have a question.
Yes.
In this game, do we both get to decide whether we're going to give money?
Yes, we'll get to that. The first part of the game, like I said, B keeps their money.
Yeah.
A has to decide what to send.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. What would I give you?
It does just pick a number. Just pick a number. It doesn't
3.
matter. Okay, so you're gonna keep 7 and send me 3. The 3 you send me is tripled.
You mean you end up getting 9?
So I end up getting 9. So I have $19.
Did I know that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I might
Well,
not
hold on.
send you as
Okay,
much.
so then the second part of the game
Yeah.
is B then gets to choose how much money to give back to A.
Okay. Does it get tripled?
No.
Okay.
Right? So the second half of the game is what's called a dictator game. It's close to the ultimatum game, but it's a dictator game because the the person getting money literally has no power.
Yeah.
Right? So I now have $19 and you have 7.
So I can't reject the offer.
Can't reject it, right? It is a straight dictator. So I say, you were nice. You gave me $9, right? Because you essentially gave me $9.
Yeah.
I'll give you your 3 back. Okay, so you end up with 10, and I have my 16.
Okay.
Okay, so does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense from, you mean just the logistics of the game?
Yeah. Do you kind of understand how the game is played?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, so the game is very fascinating on a bunch of different levels. The first is that the optimal strategy to A, technically, is to never send any money to B because there's no.
Really?
Well, think about it. Because what's the optimal strategy for B if you're playing once?
I don't know what.
It's to So let's say let's switch, okay?
Okay.
So you'll be B this time. We both get 10.
Okay. All
I
right.
send $10 to you, so you get 30.
Yeah.
So you're sitting with
Okay.
$40 in your pocket.
Yeah.
What's the best way to maximize your $40?
To not give you any.
Exactly, right. So if you play once, the
Yeah.
outcome of the dictator game is
Yeah.
to not send any money to A, and so what's the optimal strategy for A?
To not send any money.
To B, exactly, right. So in order for money to be exchanged, you have to literally form a culture of trust. That's why the game is so smart, because the optimal strategy for both people is to not send any money. But we know that there's this advantage to sending money because it gets tripled. So, society, quote unquote, at large is benefited if the money is sent, but yet individually, without a culture of trust, there's no incentive to send any.
But what if I was just trying to be nice?
Well, exactly. So let's but that was a one-off, okay?
Yeah.
And if the only way that you can if you're only playing once, the only way that A gets money back is if B is nice.
Right.
That's the altruism.
But B might be nice because A was nice first.
But hold on. If you're only playing once, it makes no difference. But what happens if you start playing multiple times? What happens if you form a society, a culture around this game, a history? Okay?
Yeah.
So and I guess I'll just say something quick. In conclusion, experiments on Ultimatum Game, repeated Prisoner Dilemmas games, and other extensive forms of games provide strong evidence that people do punish inappropriate behavior, even though this is personally costly.
Is that the revenge idea?
Yeah, right. So, the thing is that there's a kind of a follow-up study, and it's a does the trust game measure trust?
Yeah.
And so what they did was they added in punishment.
Okay, how'd they do that?
So, and I'm gonna make sure I have this. I want to make sure I'm quoting the right thing here.
We hear him typing on his keyboard.
Clickety clack, clack clack clack. Okay, so I want to talk about this study, and the study is where'd you go? Okay. Fair and Goucher in 2000, Cooperation and Punishment in Public Good Experiments.
Okay.
And so they basically played a version of the game I told you.
The second one.
The second one.
Okay.
Right. Except it's even it's a little more complicated. So
okay. What'd they do?
So what they did was they played a similar type of game. So each period, people get 20 tokens.
Okay.
And people can either keep their tokens or invest the tokens into a project.
Okay.
So, like Room A and Room B, society is best increased if you put your money into the tokens into the project.
Instead of just holding on to
because money that's put into the project is magnified and then split equally between everyone.
Okay.
Even if you don't pay into it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. If I just hold on to, so are there more than two people in this?
Yes.
Or just two? So if I just hold on to my money and I let you guys invest,
Right.
and then when there's more money, I'll get some.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. So, and there were two groups. So the first was the stranger group, which was only played with random people each round. So there's no history, right?
Okay.
The second was the partner group, which was played with the same people each round.
Okay.
So, yeah. Now, so the thing is, the decisions are simultaneous. So each round, everyone decides whether they're putting money in or they're keeping it, but you don't know until the end.
You don't know what the other people are deciding.
Exactly. The optimal outcome is to keep all the tokens to yourself, but have everyone
Optimal in terms of what?
maximizing the number of tokens that you have. So the best outcome is for you to keep all your tokens, but everyone else to put their tokens into the project.
Right.
Because then
Right.
you get the big slice from the project payout, but you're keeping yours. You're keeping your cake and eating their cake. So it's a classic free rider game. So the problem is that everyone then, once the turn is over, knows who free rode and who didn't.
Yeah, so they'll know that I kept my tokens.
Yeah. Now the dominant strategy is that everyone keeps their coins. Everyone free
Dominant,
rides.
you mean?
So that's the game. That's game theory talk. That just means, right? Because I know that if I put, my coins in, you're probably going to keep yours, so I'm going to keep mine. So then everyone just keeps their own coins.
So according to the theory, everyone would just keep their own coins.
Exactly.
Do they?
Well, so here's the thing. The average contribution, right?
Yeah.
Everyone gets 20 tokens. Okay.
Yeah.
When you normally play the game, after 10 periods,
Yeah.
the average contribution is 2 coins. And so that is the altruism model. The altruism model says, look, I'm going to benefit the community out of the goodness of my heart, and I'm going to put coins.
I'm going to play along.
I'm going to play along.
I'm going
right?
to help out.
I'm going to help
I'll
out,
invest some
and
money.
I'm giving coins.
Maybe, and I might get something back.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay.
Right? And by the end of 10 periods, either in the games with history, which is or the stranger games, stranger treatment or partner treatment, at the end of 10 rounds, on every single time, it eventually made it to about 2 tokens. So there's always,
on average.
yeah, so there's always going to be some people who are altruistic and will just give some coins to the project, trying to encourage, that everyone else works together.
Yeah.
And but that's 2 out of 20 tokens. So it's really only 2%. It's a very small, or 10%.
Can we say it's a token?
It's a token. Exactly. Okay. So that's kind of what happens. And it's very good evidence that if you want to create a culture of trust, altruism is a very, very bad way to do it.
Why?
Well, if there was a culture, so this is right. The game only works if there's a culture of trust. Because if you trust that everyone else is going to put their tokens in, then you'll put your tokens in because you know you're going to get a big payout.
Right.
But if there's not a culture of trust, you're going to keep your tokens, and everyone else is going to keep their tokens because no one else is putting their tokens in. So it's
a few people put a little bit in.
Yeah, I know. So you play around the edges. But again, only 10% of the tokens are actually going into the project.
Yeah.
So you're just not getting very many tokens.
Right.
Now, that's so that is good evidence, in my opinion, that
the altruism doesn't work.
The altruism is a very bad way to create a culture of trust because it requires, it's almost like herd immunity. If you want to create a culture of trust, you need a certain percentage of people to be altruistic, to then kind of guilt everyone else into being altruistic.
Right.
So if you're, in a monastery with a bunch of Mother Teresas, perhaps the altruism model may be a very, very good way to run your business. Because there's like this, this big kind of whatever. But if you're anywhere else, it just doesn't facilitate group dynamics.
Okay.
So let's move on then to the second part of this game, which is they added punishment.
They added punishment.
Yes. So after everyone else, after you find out, the big reveal, right?
Who put money in?
Who put money in? Who was free riding?
Yeah.
So there's a second decision stage.
Okay.
And people are given the opportunity to punish other members by assigning what's called punishment points. So there's a big reveal, and you see who put money in and who didn't, and then everyone decides who they want to punish, and then that's revealed.
Okay, so you're saying I didn't put in any.
Right.
I kept all my tokens. Mm-hmm. And did I know when I was making that decision that there was going to be this punishment?
Yes. When it kind of doesn't matter, but let's just assume.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I decide, screw the punishment.
Right.
I'm still going to hold on to my money.
So the way the punishment works is if you are given a punishment point, your payout is reduced 10%.
You mean if I
Right? So let's say I keep my 20 tokens, but I get a punishment point, I only get 18.
Oh.
And it goes all the way down to 0. So if I get 10 punishment points, I get no tokens because my payout has been reduced to 0 because I'm, So if people don't like you, they can send you home with nothing.
Yeah. They're going to vote me off the island.
They're going to vote you off the island.
Okay.
Right. So all of a sudden, yes, you can keep your tokens. But if you keep your tokens and people find out,
I'll have less and less tokens.
Now, when you play this game with history, right?
Yeah.
With the same people over and over and over, right? So if I keep all my tokens and I keeping all my tokens, people might be like, "Hey, you best watch out. You do this one more time, right? We're gonna punish you."
We're gonna punish you.
And then the next round you can because it's the same person. By the end of round 10, the average amount of contribution per person was 18 tokens.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And even and the thing is by round 4 in the history it was about 18 tokens. So so after a couple rounds of playing, people figured out very quickly this is what the culture is. You put your tokens in the project. If you don't put your tokens in the project, we will punish you.
Yeah.
And that created this blossoming culture of trust where everyone put their tokens into the project. And even here's the crazy part. Even in the rounds where where you got strangers.
Yeah.
So you didn't know who you were playing with. There were 10 rounds, but each round it was different people. Yeah. Even in those rounds, by the end of the period, the average contribution was about 12 tokens. So even when it couldn't be like, Frank, you're acting out again, people kind of realized there are Franks out there among us, and we kind of punish Franks generally. And so even when it was random people each turn, the threat of punishment made contribution levels go up to about 12. But once you have any sort of history, it's up to 18. So you go from having 10% donating to the project to 90%.
So you're creating this this idea of what the group norm is.
Exactly.
But
you're creating.
It's not a group norm based on we're nice people.
No, it's
and this
not.
is what the group does because they're nice.
No.
It's a group norm based on this is the group norm
Don't
because
step out of line. And
otherwise you're going to get punched.
And I know, and I want to kind of break the mindset we have, because when we think of like safe communities, you think of like this kind of like idyllic, like everyone's walking around and saying hi, and everyone's really altruistic. But I think anyone who's maybe grown up in that community, there's a lot of like neighbors like looking out their shutters like over fences and like staring at their neighbors like, what are they up to? Like reporting people to city council anonymously if they don't like clear their sidewalk.
The nice altruism is just a little
there's the
fake veneer.
Exactly. And then in real culture, in a lot of places where there's a lot of trust, there's in places where there's not a lot of crime, you can develop a culture of safety. But in places where there's like where people kind of stay in line, there's like a lot of noisy neighbors.
Okay, but you're really changing the definition of trust here, because this isn't trust at all. This is just like adherence to norms based out of fear.
Yes. So, but let's stick.
Is that how you're defining trust?
Let's stick with the workplace example.
Yeah.
So, and well, let me just say, let me finish. I should just finish up this research, and then we can get to the workplace example. So what's interesting is the researchers looked at how many punishment points were applied. Right? So if you freeloaded 2 to 8 tokens, less than average, right? So what was important is not how many overall tokens you contributed to the project. It was how many standard deviations, how far away from the norm did you step?
Yeah.
So if you didn't, if you stepped between 2 and 8 tokens, right? If you freeloaded a little bit, you got on average 3 punishment points. And if you tried to freeload between 8 and 14, you got about 5 punishment points. And if you freeloaded between 14 and 20, you were also, hit with 5 punishment points in the stranger group. But if you were in the partner group where there's history, you got hit with 7 punishment points.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that it had nothing to do with the overall level. It just had to do with how far outside the group dynamics you strayed. And what appears to happen is in the stranger group, if you stray really, really far, it seems like people are like, okay, we got to punish you, but perhaps you didn't know what our norms were. Right? So we're going to punish you, but we're not going to hit you too bad because maybe you didn't understand if you go really far. But people who were in the group, they and strayed outside the social norms, they were punished the worst. Yeah. They got the worst punishment out of any of the groups. You knew what the norms were. You should have known better. You didn't, and now you're getting the worst punishment. So again, the important point to know there is that punishment, that these norms develop, even in these short little games, and you can stray a little bit, and you can kind of get away with it. If you stray a little too far, if you push things, you get a little slap on the wrist from the average. If you stray really far, and it's with a stranger, if you're new to the group, you'll get punished. But if you should have known better, that's when you get the worst punishment. Okay.
This is so interesting, and it really, to me, it's disturbing for one thing. The whole thing is disturbing. I wanted altruism to win.
Well, everyone wants altruism to win, though. That's the point.
Yeah. But there's an interesting thing, because in the field, and this highlights to me the difference between psychology and behavioral economics. Because psychology would tell us, there's lots of research to show that punishment is not as effective as rewards.
Correct.
But we're not talking in that situation. We're not talking about a social situation.
Correct.
we're purely talking about, the individual organism, human, mouse, rat, dog, toddler, and the consequences of an individual action.
It's a one-off.
Consequences. It's a one-off, and it's also between the person of less power and the dictator.
Correct.
And so it's been known for a long time. Punishment is not very effective. As soon as you stop applying it, the behavior goes back to what it was before, and that's probably true with what you're talking about too. But
exactly.
But what you're talking about is that, but the punishment isn't going to go away because of the social norms of the group.
Right. And that's the interesting thing. And what this suggests is that if for example, you had that group that was contributing, everyone was contributing 18 coins a turn. And it's only 18 because some people cheeky on the edges will try to take a couple coins to, get ahead here or there. But if you got rid of the punishment or the threat of punishment, instantly the behavior would go to
was back.
Right. So your point that punishment does not work as a long-term effective motivator is completely correct.
True.
Because as soon as the punishment stops,
it's gone. Then
whereas if you use other motivators like the desire for mastery, the things we talk about, well, even if the punishment goes away, you'll still perhaps do the behavior.
Perhaps, but not based on altruism. Yeah, very interesting. So wait a minute, but so let's go back to this question of the culture of trust.
Yes.
So what does this say then? If I'm in an organization and I want to build a culture of trust.
Right.
And this organization could be my family, it could be a big corporate company, it could be the department that I work in, it could be
let's stay away from families.
All right, because there's other relationships. All right,
weird.
So let's just say this is in my either my company or my department within my company.
Yeah, whatever team you're working with.
Whatever team I'm working on. What does this say then about building a culture of trust? What should I do if I want to build a culture of trust?
So if you want to build a culture of trust, there are these norms of what is fair and what people are supposed to do. People have an inherent understanding as to what's the best way to go about things. And it's not rocket science, because when it comes to social things, we are all geniuses at understanding social stuff. But the problem is, have you ever worked for a boss and you do what the boss says because if the nothing is ever the boss's fault.
Oh yes.
Right?
Yes.
You do what the boss says. When the boss messes up,
right,
nothing happens. Right? When you mess up, you get it's just
or when the boss messes up, somebody else gets
exactly. Yeah.
The problem.
And most companies and most organizations and most structures out there do not have good levels of trust. They just don't. Because what is required, imagine if you're in the meeting, not with the boss, but with your boss's boss, right? Yeah. And the boss says something that is just the boss says, this is how the world is, right? Yeah. And you raise your hand and you say, I think that you've been doing a bad job at this, right?
Okay.
Right? What's going to happen in most of the situations is that you get severely punished socially, politically, in corporately.
You might eventually lose your job.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so what happens when you're in the big meeting with your boss's boss and the boss says something, no one ever disagrees with that person. And everyone just trips hand over foot to try to make that person happy. Make him happy. Well, that's not a culture of trust.
But how could you possibly change that?
So what is required in order to have a culture of trust, is to have, and I think I probably quoted this. You need to have punishment, and it needs to be consistent and equal across all the members.
Even the boss?
That's the secret. If one person, let's just say we're playing that game again, and there's one person in the group who never puts tokens in, right?
Yeah.
And they're never punished. Nothing bad ever happens if they're greedy, because they're the boss and you don't want to upset the boss. Then that person will always keep all their tokens. And so as soon as someone can think, oh, well, maybe I can get rid of, like, if he's not putting all of his tokens in, maybe I can become a henchman, and I don't have to, I get to keep a couple tokens for myself. And just, everyone runs to their own corners as fast as they can get away with it.
Do you think it's important, if you're trying to build a culture of trust, that the norms be articulated?
Yes. I mean, they don't have to be physically articulated or like literally articulated, but everyone has to know. That's the difference between the stranger and the partner. So everyone has to know, if I do this, I will be punished by X. And if I didn't,
so you're saying
if I didn't know that I was going to get punished, then I'm a stranger, and I'll still get punished, but I won't be punished as badly.
So you're saying it's not like it has to be in the employee handbook. Well, I mean, it could be, but the idea is it's more important that when it's breached, there's action.
But and the thing is that we're, this can happen for anything. I mean, we're talking about, we're in a group together. If someone, I'm not talking about someone like does cocaine or is, something that would be against employee handbook, but someone just like does a bad job on a project, right? They mess up somewhere. They put the circle peg on the thing when it was supposed to be the square peg. Okay. Like, that stuff happens. And what has to happen is they have to be punished. But punishment, when it comes to teams and groups, no one's getting like whipped anymore. like punishment is social punishment, right? So they have a meeting and you say, hey, Jerry, you put the square thing on the round thing again. Like, you messed up. Like, I'm not yelling at you, but like, let's try and work together to see how to fix this. But like, I'm recognizing that you did a bad job. And just the group recognition that I've made a mistake, that's, in some ways, that's enough social punishment.
Okay, so all right. I have a question though. Do you think this is feasible? I mean,
yes.
People hate that kind of public.
It's because it's punishment, right? No one wants to.
So wouldn't I just say, screw this? I'm not going to work for this company. I'm going to go somewhere where they don't call you out in public for what you did wrong.
But people only feel bad because the person who's getting called out is usually the boss, and they never get called out. When you read leadership books, a lot of what they talk about is accountability. And if you've ever had, think of like one of the best bosses you've ever had. Okay? And everyone think of it. And there was a project that didn't go well. Yeah. What does the boss do?
Well, the boss doesn't pass the buck.
The boss often takes, hey, it was my fault. I should have done better.
But you shouldn't do that if that's not true, though, right?
No. But see, that's just it. It's a culture of accountability. If you are in charge of a project, and the project goes wrong, because you're in charge, right? Like you have to be held accountable.
You automatically have blame,
and that's
but
really
other
important.
people might have blame as well.
Other people might have blame as well, absolutely.
But you do too, because you're in charge of the project.
So everyone is being held accountable for what they're in charge of. The boss is in charge of making sure the project goes well. If the project doesn't go well, it's the boss's fault, and they need to be held accountable for their failure. If I'm in charge of making the widgets and putting the circle widget in the right place, if I mess that up, I need to be held accountable for messing up my job role. Because what happens all the time is, what's the boss is responsible for making sure the project goes well. That's the only thing the boss does, is like holding meetings and making sure everything works. And so if someone puts a square thing on a round peg and messes up, the boss never gets in trouble. But then the boss isn't doing anything. Like what could possibly happen to make the boss get in trouble? And so, because it's the boss's job to make sure the project goes well. So the boss always gets the credit when the project goes well, and never, ever gets any of the negative consequences if it doesn't. So if the project doesn't go well, the boss needs to be held accountable for that failure. And we're just so ingrained that the person up top, it's never their fault, and they never, right? So in cultures where you find, I mean, and you can look at sports teams. Sports teams, they talk a lot about like winning culture. Yeah. When they lose, the coach goes, "It was my fault. I should have I should have prepared our players better. I should have, done this or that." Yeah. The best player on the team comes out and says, right? He could, even if he had a great game, I should have done more. I should have gotten my teammates involved. I should have inspired this thing or that thing. I should have, right? Like it is the people who are in charge of making sure there's success when there's failure is accountable for their failure. And companies, think of the companies that you've been to that you were really, really, really impressed with.
Yeah.
It's usually companies, where you walk in and everyone's working together, and the small little underling can have a meeting with the boss and say, "Hey, I think you should do this." And the boss, not just for show, because oftentimes like there's like an open door policy, quote unquote, but like it's not really an open door policy. But where the underlings can be like, "Hey, management, I think you're doing this wrong, and I'd like to express that you're doing a bad job." And management can say, "That's okay. We hear you, and we're not going to punish you for speaking out." So it's a what's important is to create a culture of trust is that everyone, they don't have to be treated equally, but everyone has to be able to be punished. There has to be collective punishment for every single person in the group, and punishment in a positive way, right? Like, Jerry, you messed this up. Let's work on doing better the next time.
Constructive punishment.
Yeah, right? Like, you're being held accountable for your actions, and yes, you're being like called out, and that's the social punishment of it. But
well, okay. Well, Guthrie, you really got me thinking now. So
okay, let me just take the opposite method.
What?
So if you want to destroy a society.
Yes.
So let's say there's a parent-teacher organization that you particularly dislike, and you want to destroy them.
Okay.
What you have to do is just have to figure out how to make punishments for breaking whatever the social norms of the groups are inconsistent. And as soon as that happens, everyone runs to their own best interest corners. They lose their economic collective advantage, and it'll disintegrate.
I'm going to pretend you didn't give us that clue. Well, this is really interesting, and now you got me thinking.
You got time for like one or two more questions.
I have time for one or two more questions?
I just finished my point 2 minutes ago.
Okay. All right. All right, I do have a question, but I don't think we have time for it. So you can give me a hint, and then we may have to do another podcast episode.
We're in a good place. We explained all this. It's complicated. I would just prefer that we hit the points now so I don't have to redo it.
All right, so here's my question. If I am in a culture that is of not trust, if I'm in a pass the buck, if I'm in a
inconsistent social punishment
organization,
right?
How do you go about changing that? I mean, I can see how you could start a new organization and say, we're going to make sure that we're using punishment and that it's consistent and that everyone knows the social norms and so on based on this research so that we create a culture of trust. But what if you're in a culture of not trust? Is it possible to turn it around?
And the first thing you should do is look, I say culture of punishment because that's what it is. All the books, because everything has to be kind of viewed in this
positive.
We don't punish people. We're a very nice society. Yeah, everyone wants to think that they're Mother Teresa, and they never are. But I'm not the type of person who punishes. They call it a society of accountability instead of punishment. But it's punishment.
How do you create a culture of accountability?
So the first,
if you don't have that, now.
So the first thing you have to set up is you have to look at the systems that are in place, and you have to say how. If someone, people need to be able to say, not to say you've done a bad job, but here's how I think you could do a better job. Here's some ideas for, what I think would work better. And then let the group kind of figure out if that is indeed the case. Or you have to say, I don't think that this particular way we're doing things is effective. There has to be a way for people who are, straying outside of what is considered a good job to the majority of people, for those people to be able to express it. So you have to, even if you just start with your little department, because the problem is that you can't get the CEO to be held accountable for anything, but you can start with your little team. And so you can set up a system of accountability and trust in your team. And it requires everyone to be vulnerable. Like that's why it doesn't happen, because you have to be right. Like if if you're the boss, if you set the system up, people will complain about your behavior. Yep. And you have to be confident enough to do it,
to
take it, and to take accountability if people have negative things to say, and that's okay. And to be able to have, because usually there's not a culture of accountability. And so you probably never hear anything bad because no one would tell the boss, I think you're doing a bad job. Right? So it's, it takes someone who's in charge to set up a system. And that's the whole point about choice architecture and behavioral economics. Like, we're going to set up a system where everyone can freely hold everyone else accountable.
But but I think, and I'm thinking about some of the without naming names, I'm thinking about some of the clients we've worked with, and about how, if they walked in the room and said, okay, we don't have a system of trust here, and so we're going to start doing things differently, and so I would like your feedback on what's not working. I mean, I don't know that people would speak up because I don't.
No, they never do.
So much,
they're in the room.
There's not trust.
And
I mean, that's the
we've
whole
done
point.
1,000 meetings where we talk to people and they're like, oh my God, this thing is messed up and this thing is messed up, and like the way we do this is like horrible and everyone hates it. And they get in the meeting and the boss goes, so what?
So tell me, really, I want honest feedback.
What can we do to be better? And it's just crickets.
Silence.
It's just crickets, right? Right.
But I think...
And that is because there's not a culture of trust, because they think that if they speak up, eventually it'll come down and hurt them negatively.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I want to say that... well, you just have me thinking about... My brain is going 100 miles a minute, so I don't know that I can say anything, except that I want to work on this. And I want to work on practical ways... practical things, very practical, very specific, that people and organizations can do to turn this around if they're in a situation of non-trust. And I think, and I guess I want to inject one other idea, and that is that in this time of, because there is a lot of, public shaming and people in high places getting toppled and all of that going on in our society right now in some cases.
Mm-hmm. But the thing is,
And
and I just want to say on this point, because you mentioned that earlier.
yes.
So this is a very good, so if a company steps out of line, right, they're
Yeah.
getting publicly held accountable. But the problem is that in order for that to work, there has to be consequences. There has to be punishment. Like if the
I agree.
company doesn't, so let's just say there's a politician, right? And the politician does something that's beyond the social norms, okay? Of what the other party would consider, right, socially acceptable.
Yeah.
Well, it's only punishment if there's negative consequences to that politician. But if the politician is like, I don't care what you guys think, there are no negative consequences. In fact, it just makes my base happier with me.
Yeah.
It's not punishment.
Yeah, well, I understand that.
Yeah,
I understand that. But there has been some punishment going on. But I think that with some organizations and some
like United, like throwing people around on airplanes, or Me Too stuff, or stuff like that.
There's all kinds all kinds of stuff. But I think one of the points I want to make is that these organizations, when they do take action and there are consequences to bad behavior, I think they need to really grab that opportunity and realize it's not just a one-off, that they need to think about how do we communicate that we have norms and there's consequences to going outside the norms. And it's not just one person, okay, that we fired them and therefore, now we're fine. Right. Or that even firing is the answer.
And that's just it, right? Because what's important is, again, not how much it's how much you've deviated. It's what's the perceived deviation.
Yeah, and it's not
some
just,
companies do it and they get like creamed for it, and then other companies, they do it on the hush hush and no one knows, right? And they get away with it.
Right. Or the idea being there are only consequences if you go way outside this particular norm. Otherwise there's no consequence, So I think if with this whole idea, we may think, okay, it's good that this public shaming is starting to happen and it'll build a culture of trust, but it may not unless, it's not just for the big, egregious, one-time action. It's more of a day-to-day. Anyway, you really got me, you got me thinking, and I can tell you when we get off the air, and we'll probably be talking more about this, because I would like to find a way to help organizations, because I think these
hire us.
Yeah, these are big. These are important issues, and if you want to function profitably, you want to keep your best employees. You want to work on these issues of trust. All right. Guthrie, thanks for sharing all that. And in your blog posts, your video blogs where you talk about some of this, do you actually have references?
Oh yeah, I got references on all this stuff.
So we can we'll send people when we publish the
I can how's this sound?
notice.
I can also just send you the references, and if you want to just post them.
Yeah, do that, and I'll just post them with the podcast post.
I'll send you
all
that
right.
right away.
Thanks everyone for listening. If you have comments, you can reach us.
Yes. Info.
How should they reach us?
info@teamw.com, and then also, I also want to just say that we're putting together summer schedules. So.
You mean of our work?
Yeah, of workshops and stuff. We just did a wonderful workshop in Raleigh, North Carolina. So if you're interested in bringing us in for training and stuff,
We can do a workshop on this.
We can do a workshop on anything. Also, I will do a workshop on.
No, I'm not doing a workshop on anything.
Oh, okay.
No, but we can do a workshop on this topic, or others, and you can hire us for consulting too. Okay, thanks, Guthrie.
Thanks all. I'll talk to you all later. Bye.
Bye.